Why does the world reward some men while leaving others to toil endlessly in the dust? You are taught that labor alone will open the gates of fortune, that sweat and persistence are the currency of success. Yet, you see the truth in every city, every boardroom, every battlefield. The men who rise are not those who endure, but those who command. Hard work is the seed sown in barren soil if it lacks control. Without leverage, your effort is a river that disappears into sand. Wealth, power, influence, they are not given to those who labor blindly. They are claimed by those who bend circumstances to their will, who master the machinery that moves men, markets, and nations. Control is the unseen hand. It is the command over perception, over timing, over alliances. It is the knowledge that human ambition is predictable, that loyalty is negotiable, and that fear and desire are more potent than reason. A man who works endlessly but submits to every current is a leaf on a river, drifting while others build the dams and redirect the flow. Leverage multiplies the small into the vast. It is the ability to make others work for your vision, to turn influence into resources and resources into dominion. He who knows how to leverage understands that power is not measured in effort, but in the effect one leaves upon the world with minimal expenditure of self. Ambition alone is insufficient. It must be disciplined by strategy. The marketplace, the office, the state, all are theaters where appearances mask intention, where every handshake and every promise carries a hidden calculus. One cannot rely on virtue, nor plead for fairness. These are illusions for the weak. Observe, adapt, anticipate. These are your tools. The man who grasps the psychology of others wields a force stronger than any army. To manipulate is not evil, but necessity. To withhold, to persuade, to command subtly, to align the self with the currents of power, these are the arts ignored by those who mistake toil for triumph. Fear, when properly applied, is as essential as reward. It is a measure of influence. Loyalty bought or earned through respect alone is fragile. It must be balanced by the awareness of consequence. Betrayal is a constant companion. Expect it, watch for it, and plan with it as a foundation. Those who fail to anticipate the treachery of men fall regardless of their diligence. Hard work cannot shield you from deceit, from misaligned ambition, from the calculated designs of others who understand leverage and control. Time is a resource more precious than labor. The man who understands how to deploy resources, to delegate wisely, to amplify his presence, is the one who transforms effort into empire. Labor without direction is noise. Labor without leverage is wasted energy. Wealth emerges not from the hours you give, but from the authority you command and the systems you create to convert effort into impact. To grasp this is to step into the mind of power itself, calm, detached, observant, yet ruthless in execution. The world does not honor diligence. It rewards orchestration. Every empire, every corporation, every ascent begins not with sweat, but with design, with control, with leverage. Master these, and the river of effort bends to your will. Ignore them, and you will work endlessly, carrying the weight of a world that does not recognize your labor. Hard work alone is a candle in the wind. Leverage and control are the architects of the flame that never dies. To command is to understand the mechanics beneath the surface, the hidden levers that move men and markets alike. The man who believes that diligence alone will deliver fortune is blind to the architecture of influence that structures every outcome. Control begins with the self. Mastery over desire, over reaction, over the small impulses that betray weakness. Only when a man governs his own mind can he extend that dominion outward, shaping the behavior of others, bending circumstances to his advantage. The world does not respond to effort. It responds to presence, to perception, to the subtle assertion of authority that signals competence before a word is spoken. Leverage is the instrument through which one multiplies effect. It is not the hours you expend, but the outcomes you orchestrate. Capital, knowledge, alliances, reputation, each is a tool waiting to be applied. The shrewd operator sees the connections invisible to the industrious laborer, transforming small advantages into decisive victories. To leverage is to transform the inertia of others into motion for your designs, to convert their energy into your power. This is the art ignored by the diligent, who mistake repetition for progress and sweat for influence. Ambition without strategy is a storm without direction. It destroys those who lack foresight. One must anticipate the desires and fears of others, align incentives, and manipulate perception. The appearance of virtue, the promise of reward, the subtle threat of consequence, these are the currencies of control. Loyalty must be cultivated, but it must also be tempered with accountability, for betrayal waits patiently for opportunity. The man who fails to account for this is undone, not by his labor, but by the unseen calculations of others who understand leverage and the ruthless architecture of influence. Time is the silent ally of those who comprehend power. Every wasted hour is a concession. Every misapplied effort strengthens competitors. The wise deploy effort with precision, focusing on actions whose effects are multiplied through systems, networks, and influence. Wealth emerges not from motion, but from the orchestration of forces, men, resources, circumstance in alignment with intention. Those who fail to see this remain captives of their own diligence, endlessly spinning without progress, while others rise by guiding the currents unseen. The man who masters control and leverage moves like the shadow of inevitability. He is calm, measured, aware of the human impulses that govern behavior, yet detached enough to manipulate them without hesitation. He understands that power is not moral, it is mechanical. Those who work tirelessly without comprehension are like oarsmen rowing against a current they cannot see, their exertion meaningless against the hidden tides of influence. To seize fortune, to command destiny, one must think several moves ahead, align resources invisibly, and act decisively when the moment presents itself. Effort alone will never carry you to the heights you seek. Only the mind that understands control, the hand that wields leverage, and the patience to wait for the precise alignment of forces can transform toil into triumph. Hard work is the foundation, but without strategy, without manipulation of circumstance, without orchestration of men and resources, it is dust upon dust. The path to wealth, to influence, to power lies not in endless labor, but in the mastery of the systems that govern the world, and in the ruthless, intelligent application of control and leverage to bend those systems to your will. Every man believes he controls his fate, yet most are guided by forces they neither see nor understand. They toil endlessly, unaware that their effort is a mere ripple in a vast sea of unseen currents. The world bends not to persistence, but to orchestration, to the deliberate alignment of means with ends. To succeed, one must first map the terrain, recognize the ambitions, weaknesses, and fears that drive others, and position oneself to exploit them. Observation is power, calculation is necessity. The laborer acts, the strategist directs. One transforms mere action into authority when effort is applied with intelligence, timing, and precision. Influence is the true currency, and leverage is its amplifier. One can possess no empire without allies, no market without networks, no dominion without channels through which energy flows. The man who understands this does not exhaust himself with unending work. He multiplies his effect by arranging resources so that the motion of others serves his purpose. Every conversation, every negotiation, every gesture becomes a tool, every interaction an opportunity to shift balance. The ignorant mistake exertion for progress. The enlightened engineer outcomes with subtlety, patience, and foresight. Fear and desire are more potent than reason. They are the levers that move men when logic cannot. A ruler who masters these can secure loyalty, bend rivals, and control outcomes without revealing force. Rewards entice, but the anticipation of consequence ensures obedience. A failure to understand this is the downfall of many who work harder than anyone else. yet rise no higher than obscurity. Effort is neutral. It is the channel through which power flows that determines whether labor bears fruit or vanishes into the void. Time and perception are allies to those who command, enemies to those who merely act. Timing transforms the modest into the monumental. Perception can convert weakness into respect, absence into demand, motion into authority. The man who seizes these understands that reality is shaped as much by what is seen and believed as by what is done. To dominate, one must craft reality as the stage is arranged for a play meticulously, strategically, invisibly, so that every movement reinforces the impression of inevitability. Hard work without comprehension is blind. Ambition without leverage is impotent. The modern world rewards those who can manipulate circumstance, marshal resources, and orchestrate human behavior with precision. Sweat is not power. Intellect, patience, and control are. Wealth and influence accrue to those who see the architecture of consequence, who anticipate the currents of human nature, and who apply effort not for its own sake, but as a tool in the construction of dominion. To labor endlessly is commendable only if guided by the hand of strategy. Without it, one becomes a cog in the machine of others' making, a ghost chasing shadows, while empires are built by those who understand the mechanics of power. Every empire, every fortune, every ascent begins with insight into leverage and control. Hard work is the furnace, but strategy is the flame. Effort alone is fleeting. Applied with intelligence and authority, it becomes unstoppable. He who grasps this commands not only labor, but outcome, not only action, but destiny. The man who rises does so because he has learned what the world forgets, that success is not measured in sweat, but in the ability to bend circumstance, influence men, and wield the hidden levers of power until the river of effort flows entirely in his direction. The world is indifferent to morality. It responds only to consequence. A man may labor faithfully, he may honor every principle of diligence, yet without understanding the machinery of influence, his work is scattered like seeds upon stone. To ascend, one must become the architect of circumstance, shaping events before they shape him. Anticipation is the currency of power, foresight the shield against betrayal. One studies not only men's actions, but their motives, their vanities, their fears. For it is in these hidden chambers that control is won. The ruler who neglects this is undone by those who do not. Authority is born in the mind before it manifests in the world. The careful observer notes the alignment of ambition, the ebb of loyalty, the shadows where envy and resentment gather. These are not to be feared, but to be harnessed, transformed into instruments of influence. A wise man employs flattery, restraint, and subtle intimidation with the same hand, always calculating, always measuring, never revealing more than necessary. Those who mistake force for command are crushed by the quiet, deliberate maneuvers of those who understand leverage. Opportunity is fleeting. Hesitation is fatal. The man who masters control knows when to act and when to withhold, when to advance and when to retreat. Timing is as crucial as force. A decision made too soon or too late renders effort impotent. The world yields only to those who combine patience with decisiveness, calculation with courage, strategy with resolve. The laborer may endure years of toil, yet fall before the strategist who deploys resources, alliances, and influence with precision at the decisive moment. One must also recognize that the instruments of power are mutable. Friends, allies, even dependents are often guided by self-interest, not loyalty. To wield influence over them is to appeal to their ambitions, to anticipate their self-interest, and to align it with your own designs. Expect betrayal as naturally as sunrise. Prepare for it as meticulously as a general arranges his battalions. The wise ruler turns potential threats into leverage, transforming enmity into opportunity, opposition into compliance. Control and leverage are inseparable. Control without leverage is impotent. Leverage without control is chaotic. The man who understands both bends men and circumstance simultaneously, shaping the flow of events invisibly, guiding outcomes while appearing idle. Hard work, in comparison, is a blind instrument, energy expended without comprehension. To rise, to endure, to prevail, one must operate with the mind of a tactician, the patience of a historian, and the resolve of one who knows that the architecture of power is both ruthless and unforgiving. Every movement, every conversation, every decision carries weight. Nothing occurs without consequence. The ruler who comprehends this shapes events rather than reacts to them. Labor alone cannot secure advantage. Perception alone cannot enforce it. Only through deliberate orchestration of circumstance, people, and resources can one transform effort into dominion. The man who grasps this truth seizes not only wealth, but influence, not only opportunity, but inevitability, bending the world quietly and resolutely until all forces converge to serve his will. The men who rise are not those who toil in silence, but those who see the currents beneath the surface and navigate them with deliberate precision. Fortune favors not the diligent hand alone, but the calculated mind. One must study the patterns of ambition, the architecture of desire, and the subtle hierarchies that govern every assembly of men. To act without such knowledge is to fight blind against forces that will always overpower the unprepared. Strategy is the lens through which effort becomes effect. Understanding the terrain of power is the compass that guides all movement. Deception is not a vice, it is a tool. The appearance of loyalty, the promise of virtue, the projection of strength, all are instruments in the orchestration of influence. To reveal one's intentions prematurely is to weaken the hand. To conceal them is to command the outcome. Men act according to perception as much as reality. Those who master this distinction bend both the willing and the unwilling to their designs. Control is exercised quietly, invisibly, until its effect is absolute, until action is no longer needed because the machinery itself serves your will. One cannot ignore the multiplicity of human motives. Greed, envy, fear, ambition, each is a lever waiting to be pulled. The shrewd ruler calculates not only his own advantage, but the probable actions of all around him. Every promise, every concession, every display of generosity must be measured against the backdrop of human nature and the inevitability of self-interest. Those who misjudge these currents find that effort is wasted, loyalty is fleeting, and opportunity passes while they remain blind to the invisible architecture that governs outcomes. Patience is a weapon. The world often rewards those who wait, not because fate is just, but because others act impulsively, revealing weakness. To endure, to observe, to position oneself while others exhaust themselves in labor or complaint is to prepare the moment when decisive action will yield disproportionate effect. The laborer works for the present, the strategist manipulates for the future. One converts time into leverage, aligning circumstances, relationships, and perception so that when the moment arrives, the result is inevitable. Power is inseparable from knowledge. To labor is insufficient. To command, one must understand. Every system, every institution, every network is composed of human nature, and the man who knows its mechanics exerts influence over both motion and outcome. The diligent may exhaust himself moving the world, yet the one who comprehends leverage shapes the world to move for him. Hard work is the soil, but insight, strategy, and command are the plow, the seed, and the harvest. Without them, effort is barren. With them, it becomes inexorable, unstoppable, and absolute. The world is neither fair nor moral, it is structured. Success comes not to those who labor hardest, but to those who see the structure, understand its mechanisms, and act with deliberate calculation. Control and leverage are the tools, timing and perception the instruments, and human nature the material. Master these, and the labor of others, the tides of fortune, and the alignment of circumstance all bend to your will. Ignore them, and all effort, all sweat, all persistence serves only to illuminate your impotence before the architecture of power that governs men and fate alike. Influence is not granted, it is seized, quietly and relentlessly. The man who believes that work alone will yield reward misjudges the world. Every opportunity carries with it unseen constraints. Every alliance hides motives that may oppose his own. To navigate this reality, one must be both patient and audacious, calculating in approach yet decisive in execution. The clever manipulates circumstance. The wise observes patterns before committing. The prudent anticipates the reactions of men whose intentions are seldom pure. To fail in this understanding is to toil endlessly while others reap the benefits of foresight. Resources, whether men, wealth, or reputation, have power only when deployed strategically. The unthinking laborer expends energy without multiplying its effect. The man of insight positions his instruments so that the movement of one lever produces change across the entire mechanism. Influence becomes a force of its own, self-reinforcing, and unstoppable when aligned with the hidden currents of ambition and fear. One's own effort, however vigorous, is insufficient if it is not embedded in a network of leverage that converts action into consequence. The world is indifferent to fairness or virtue. It bows only to authority and effect. Promises must be measured, threats calibrated, gestures of goodwill timed to serve purpose. Loyalty is never absolute. It is conditional and often transactional. To understand this is not cynicism, but realism. Every man carries within him the seed of self-interest, and the shrewd manipulates this seed to grow according to design. Anticipation of betrayal is as vital as the cultivation of trust. To neglect either is to invite ruin. Timing shapes outcomes as surely as action. A decisive move too early or too late loses its force. The skilled operator waits until the conditions, human and material, align. Observation, calculation, and patience become instruments of power, turning inaction into preparation and subtle maneuvering into domination. While others exhaust themselves in blind activity, the strategist secures position, marshals resources, and primes circumstances so that when action arrives, it is overwhelming and complete. To rise is to operate beyond labor. To endure is to wield insight. One must comprehend the patterns that govern human behavior, the invisible hierarchies that structure influence, the delicate balance between fear and favor. Effort without this understanding is mere motion. Leverage without insight is fragile. Only through the combination of foresight, control, and the orchestration of circumstance does labor transform into lasting authority. Success is not an accident of diligence. It is the inevitable consequence of mastery over the forces that govern men, fortune, and fate. Every empire, every fortune, every position of command is built not by the tireless, but by the calculated. The man who understands the machinery of power aligns effort with effect, perception with reality, ambition with opportunity. He bends circumstance quietly, invisibly, so that every resource, every alliance, every moment of fortune converges toward his will. To labor without this comprehension is to remain a spectator, to be shaped by the currents of others' design. To grasp it is to become the architect of consequence, the master of leverage, and the commander of destiny itself. The strength of a man is measured not in the hours he labors, but in the precision with which he directs the labor of others. Men are instruments, not equals. Their ambitions, fears, and weaknesses must be understood, anticipated, and, when necessary, manipulated. Authority is asserted as much through subtle positioning as through open action. The ruler who masters this quiet command bends outcomes before motion is taken, ensuring that the world moves in accord with his designs while appearing untouched by force. Knowledge of human nature is indispensable. Pride, envy, ambition, and greed are constants. They are predictable when observed without illusion. A shrewd operator does not appeal to virtue alone, for virtue is fragile and often absent. He appeals to desire, to fear, to self-interest, aligning the inclinations of others with his own purpose. In every interaction, there lies the potential to convert compliance into influence, opposition into opportunity, hesitation into decisive advantage. The ignorant, in contrast, confound labor with control, effort with effect, and and find themselves powerless amidst the currents they do not perceive. Circumstance is neither friend nor enemy. It is the material upon which power is exercised. To act without comprehension is to be swept aside. The wise surveys the field, notes the position of rivals, the loyalties of allies, the weaknesses of institutions, and then arranges action with ruthless economy. Each move is deliberate, each concession calculated, each interaction measured for its potential to reinforce command. The man who misjudges this sees his labor dissipate like mist, while the strategist who understands it converts minimal motion into decisive dominion. The appearance of control often outweighs control itself. Perception governs reality as much as force. It molds expectations, constrains opponents, and signals inevitability. Those who labor without shaping perception expend effort that achieves nothing. To succeed, one must craft the narrative of competence, the impression of inevitability, the subtle suggestion of power, all while keeping the machinery of influence and leverage quietly in motion. The world bends to those who command both minds and circumstances, even before action is openly taken. One must also recognize the mutability of alliances. Friends may turn to enemies, dependence to rivals, loyalty to self-interest. To navigate this, the master of power cultivates flexibility, reserves influence, and positions contingencies. Betrayal is not a misfortune, but a certainty to be accounted for, anticipated, and, when necessary, exploited. By converting threats into leverage, one transforms risk into instrument, weakness into opportunity, chaos into architecture. Ultimately, effort alone is insufficient. It is the mind, guided by strategy and insight, that transforms action into dominion. Hard work without comprehension is a shadow. Control without leverage is impotent. The ruler who grasps the hidden levers of men, the patterns of circumstance, and the rhythm of opportunity wields influence beyond labor, achieves outcomes beyond motion, and secures power beyond competition. Mastery of control, perception, and leverage is the path not merely to wealth or status, but to the inevitability of command itself. Authority is fragile unless fortified by foresight. Men are restless. Circumstances shift like sand beneath the feet. The man who relies on the constancy of loyalty or the permanence of alliances is already weakened. To endure, one must cultivate foresight, observing patterns of behavior, anticipating ambition, and understanding the incentives that drive action. The wise adjust before the storm arrives, positioning resources, aligning influence, and subtly steering events so that when change occurs, it serves his purpose rather than undermines it. Preparation is power. Reaction is vulnerability. Conflict is inevitable, yet it is often concealed beneath the veneer of civility. A ruler must see beneath appearances, discerning where ambition lurks, where resentment simmers, and where opportunity lies hidden. To confront openly is sometimes necessary, but more often, victory is secured quietly through manipulation of circumstance and careful orchestration of perception. The world bends not to force alone, but to subtle pressure, applied with intelligence and timing. Those who misunderstand this expend effort fruitlessly, while the strategist converts the currents of ambition, envy, and fear into instruments of command. The deployment of men is as important as their management. Every subordinate carries motives that may align or conflict with the ruler's objective. To govern effectively is to anticipate these motives, to align incentives, and to create structures in which self-interest furthers the designs of authority. Discipline is not imposed through labor alone, but through systems that convert inclination into utility. Effort directed without understanding of these structures is wasted. Influence applied with insight multiplies outcomes far beyond the reach of toil. Fortune is neither friend nor foe. It is a force to be directed, exploited, and anticipated. Opportunities arise unpredictably, and the man who is unprepared cannot convert chance into advantage. Patience and vigilance are instruments of command. When conditions align, decisive action converts potential into dominion. The laborer waits for reward. The strategist creates it. One moves not according to impulse, but according to calculation, measuring every risk, every resource, every alignment of circumstance before committing to the decisive act. Power is inseparable from subtlety. To coerce openly invites resistance. To manipulate skillfully achieves compliance without confrontation. The appearance of fairness, the projection of inevitability, the careful distribution of favor and consequence, these are tools as potent as armies or wealth. The ignorant expend sweat to achieve motion. The wise expend thought to achieve outcome. Hard work may sustain, but it cannot elevate beyond what insight, leverage, and control make inevitable. The man who commands recognizes that everything is mutable. Men, alliances, circumstance, perception. To succeed is to understand this mutability, to anticipate shifts, and to direct change so that every variable serves the purpose of authority. Effort alone is insufficient. Intelligence, foresight, and strategy are essential. Control over men and circumstance, the ability to anticipate and manipulate, and the skill to convert opportunity into inevitability, these are the true instruments of power. He who masters them rises beyond labor, beyond chance, and beyond opposition, bending the world to his will as inevitably as the river shapes the valley through which it flows. Every position of power rests upon the understanding that men are instruments, not companions. They are moved by self-interest, by fear, by desire, and rarely by principle. The ruler who assumes loyalty or honor as natural qualities is doomed to disappointment. To govern is to manipulate these impulses, to align them with one's own designs, and to ensure that every man's ambition serves, willingly or not, the objectives of authority. One must create dependency, structure incentives, and orchestrate circumstance so that even the reluctant advance the purposes of command. Control is sustained through vigilance as much as through action. Complacency invites erosion, for influence is never permanent. It must be continually reinforced. Observation, subtle adjustment, and timely intervention maintain supremacy. A single misjudgment, an overlooked motive, a neglected rivalry, these are seeds of downfall. The man who labors tirelessly yet observes nothing is powerless. The man who directs with calculation achieves dominion far beyond the measure of effort. Success is a product of anticipation, as much as execution, of intelligence, as much as persistence. Conflict is rarely overt. It is embedded in the texture of human interaction. To prevail, one must detect the concealed currents of ambition and resentment, discern where opportunity lies hidden, and act in ways that convert potential threats into advantages. Subtlety, misdirection, and the management of perception are instruments of power as indispensable as armies or wealth. To act openly without such preparation is to invite resistance. To act with foresight is to achieve inevitability. Leverage is the multiplier of influence. Resources alone are inert. Men alone are unpredictable. But when circumstances, human motives, and timing are aligned with purpose, the smallest effort produces results disproportionate to its scale. The wise distribute responsibility, delegate authority, and create networks in which others' ambition furthers their own. Hard work is impotent without leverage. Strategy transforms motion into outcome. To rise above mediocrity, one must not only labor, but also design the system in which labor produces power. Fortune favors the prepared mind. Opportunity is never certain. It must be anticipated, cultivated, and seized decisively. Patience is not idleness. It is the discipline to wait until conditions maximize effect. One acts neither impulsively nor rashly, but with deliberate calculation, ensuring that action achieves disproportionate consequence. The man who comprehends timing converts chance into dominion, while the man who fails is carried helplessly by the currents of circumstance. Ultimately, mastery of men, of circumstance, and of perception defines success. Labor without strategy is wasted. Action without anticipation is vulnerability. Authority arises not from effort alone, but from the orchestration of leverage, the exercise of control, and the anticipation of human nature. He who understands this wields power invisibly, quietly, and inevitably. He transforms the efforts of others into instruments of his will, bends fortune to his design, and secures outcomes before opposition can respond. This is the architecture of command, calculated, remorseless, and enduring the path by which labor is converted into true dominion. Every action in the realm of power carries consequence beyond its immediate appearance. The man who labors without understanding the networks of influence labors in vain. Men's intentions are rarely aligned with virtue. They are governed by self-interest, and their actions must be interpreted through that lens. To command is to anticipate these intentions, to arrange circumstance so that every move of others serves one's purpose, and to convert opposition into a mechanism for advancement. Authority is maintained not through kindness alone, nor through brute strength, but through the subtle orchestration of human motive. Institutions and structures are extensions of the ruler's will, but they function only when aligned with human nature. Laws, orders, and formal authority are insufficient without the anticipation of ambition and fear. A wise leader observes not only what is declared, but what is concealed: the murmurs of resentment, the glances of envy, the ambitions hidden behind loyalty. Every interaction becomes a measure of power, every gesture a test of alignment, and every decision a potential lever. Those who labor blindly fail to see these currents and are swept aside. Those who calculate manipulate them to their advantage. The perception of inevitability strengthens command. Men follow what they believe to be inevitable, even when it is constructed from subtle influence rather than force. To shape perception is to shape reality. Display of confidence, selective generosity, measured restraint, and carefully positioned influence all signal competence and inevitability. The laborer acts to survive, the strategist acts to dominate. Success is not granted to the diligent alone, but to the architect of consequence who converts appearances into instruments of power. Patience is the shield of mastery. Impulsiveness betrays weakness. Delayed action, when combined with observation, creates advantage. To wait is not idleness, but the calculation to strike when conditions ensure maximal effect. Men expend effort blindly. The master of strategy converts the same effort into results that far exceed the labor invested. Every alliance, every negotiation, every subtle maneuver is assessed for its potential to advance the overarching design of power. Betrayal and opposition are constants, not anomalies. To ignore this is to court ruin. The ruler secures loyalty not by reliance on goodwill alone, but through alignment of self-interest with authority. Fear, respect, and opportunity are instruments that guide behavior without constant enforcement. A well-positioned structure, once established, perpetuates dominance even against those who would act contrary to it. Effort is insufficient without such orchestration. The wise convert hazard into leverage, resistance into instrument, and uncertainty into inevitability. Ultimately, labor is only the first step. Mastery arises from foresight, control, and the orchestration of circumstance. The ruler who comprehends the architecture of human behavior, the currents of opportunity, and the subtleties of perception achieves outcomes beyond the reach of mere effort. Power is secured not by motion alone, but by calculated action, anticipation, and the relentless application of strategy. To wield influence, to command obedience, and to shape destiny, one must operate as both observer and architect, transforming every element of circumstance into an instrument of authority. Men are rarely what they appear. The world is rarely what it seems. To govern without seeing the hidden motives behind every word, every gesture, every alliance, is to surrender to chance. The laborer may build, but he cannot direct. He may endure, but he cannot dominate. The ruler who succeeds observes with unflinching clarity, deciphers the currents beneath the surface, and positions himself so that even the movements of others become instruments of his design. Knowledge of intent is the lever that transforms effort into consequence. Power is sustained through continuous adaptation. Circumstance shifts, loyalties waver, and fortunes rise and fall with unpredictable rhythm. The man who relies solely on what he has achieved is already vulnerable. The wise ruler anticipates the next fluctuation, preparing contingencies and preemptively converting potential threats into advantage. Every relationship, every alliance, every agreement is provisional. Understanding the impermanence of circumstance allows one to act with foresight, striking when opportunity peaks and retreating before danger crystallizes. The perception of authority is inseparable from authority itself. Men obey what they believe to be inevitable, even more readily than what is imposed by force. To craft inevitability, one must manage appearances, conceal weaknesses, and project confidence and competence. Influence is reinforced when others perceive success as preordained, and the labor of compliance multiplies without overt enforcement. The strategist knows that appearances can become instruments, shaping behavior as effectively as action itself. Leverage magnifies every effort. Resources, alliances, and position remain inert until applied with understanding of human nature and circumstance. The man who coordinates these elements converts minimal input into maximal effect. Delegation is not merely practical, it is tactical, turning the ambition of others into service of one's own objectives. To labor without alignment is to exhaust oneself for nothing. To orchestrate through leverage is to achieve outcomes that appear effortless. The currents of ambition, fear, and desire are constant. They must be anticipated, manipulated, and, when necessary, controlled. To ignore them is to invite betrayal. To miscalculate is to invite ruin. The ruler secures obedience not by morality, nor by industriousness, but by constructing conditions where self-interest converges with authority, where consequence and reward are balanced to ensure compliance. Resistance is neutralized through foresight, influence, and alignment of incentives. In the end, true mastery is the combination of observation, anticipation, and orchestration. Labor alone builds no dominion. Effort without insight is a hollow exercise. Control over men, circumstances, and perception, applied with relentless calculation, transforms action into effect, volatility into inevitability, and opportunity into enduring power. He who understands this governs not only with strength, but with the quiet, unassailable authority that renders opposition futile before it is even expressed. To hold power is to recognize that fortune is fickle and men are unreliable. The diligent man may exhaust himself, yet a single misjudgment in reading character or circumstance can nullify years of effort. The ruler who endures and prevails studies the patterns of human ambition, the limits of loyalty, and the inevitability of self-interest. He positions himself so that even the unexpected serves his purpose, transforming chance into instrument and instability into advantage. Every fluctuation becomes a tool for those who can perceive its use. The subtleties of influence outweigh the bluntness of action. A word spoken at the right moment, a gesture calculated to convey inevitability, a concession timed to reinforce dependence. These are instruments of authority as potent as armies. Men respond more readily to perception than reality. They yield to confidence, to design, to the appearance of unassailable power. To command effectively is to shape these perceptions while guiding the currents of circumstance invisibly, so that obedience is secured before confrontation is required. One must regard alliances as instruments rather than guarantees. Friends, allies, and subordinates carry motives that may align today and diverge tomorrow. The wise ruler anticipates this, cultivating flexibility, preserving optionality, and structuring dependencies, so that ambition serves the authority rather than undermines it. Betrayal is not a misfortune but a certainty. Its anticipation transforms hazard into leverage, threat into opportunity, and opposition into instrument. The man who fails to account for this invites his own downfall, regardless of his diligence. Time is as essential as control. Every moment unobserved every opportunity unexploited is a concession. The patient strategist watches, evaluates, and positions himself until the moment of maximal effect arrives. Labor expended without timing is wasted. Leverage applied without consideration of circumstance achieves only partial effect. The ruler who comprehends rhythm and opportunity converts the ordinary into decisive advantage, converting the unpredictable motion of men and events into ordered instruments of command. Knowledge of human nature and circumstance is inseparable from success. Ambition, fear, envy, and desire are levers that can be used to manipulate, control, and direct. The man who aligns these forces with strategy converts minimal effort into outcomes disproportionate to input. Hard work alone accomplishes little. Insight, anticipation, and orchestration achieve inevitability. Authority, once secured through such mastery, becomes self-reinforcing as men, institutions, and circumstance bend unconsciously to the designs of the perceptive and calculating ruler. Ultimately, mastery arises not from labor, but from the precise alignment of intelligence, foresight, and leverage. Every action, every interaction, every observation is evaluated for its capacity to further dominion. Those who rise understand that effort is only effective when applied through insight and control, that influence is multiplied by anticipation and perception, and that power is consolidated not by motion alone, but by orchestrating circumstance until outcome becomes inevitable. The ruler who comprehends this governs as the architect of consequence, bending men, fortune, and opportunity to his will with deliberate, unassailable design. The measure of a ruler is in his capacity to convert uncertainty into advantage. The world offers neither justice nor constancy. It yields only to those who recognize its patterns and manipulate them with precision. Men, institutions, and fortune are instruments, not allies. To ascend, one must anticipate the shifting alignments of interest, exploit the ambitions of others, and structure circumstance so that events advance the designs of the perceptive. Effort without calculation achieves nothing. Foresight transforms action into dominion. Every opportunity is a vector, every alliance a potential lever. The ruler who comprehends leverage positions men, resources, and perception to multiply effect. Delegation becomes strategic. Labor of others becomes force applied to one's purpose, and influence spreads invisibly until opposition is preempted. The man who works without this understanding expends energy for no result. The man who orchestrates achieves outcomes that appear effortless, inevitable, and absolute. Control is exercised as much through anticipation as through action. Every statement, every concession, every display of authority must be measured for its effect on perception and circumstance. Human motives are mutable and often concealed. The discerning ruler deciphers them, channels them, and aligns them with his objective. Misjudgment is fatal, yet the prudent convert potential threats into instruments, resentment into leverage, and resistance into support, all without revealing the hand that guides. Patience is a weapon as sharp as force. Impulsiveness exposes weakness. Hesitation without strategy is futility. To wait, to observe, and to act only when conditions magnify effect is the art of mastery. Fortune favors the prepared mind, and preparedness is not mere diligence but the calculation of circumstance, human inclination, and timing. The laborer drifts, the strategist directs. One transforms uncertainty into inevitability by acting when advantage peaks, ensuring that effort is not squandered but compounded. Betrayal, opposition, and envy are constants. To ignore them is to invite ruin. To anticipate them is to wield them. The ruler structures incentives so that ambition serves authority, aligns fear with compliance, and projects inevitability so that resistance collapses before it is expressed. Every relationship is assessed for its utility, every resource leveraged to reinforce position, and every outcome engineered to serve the consolidation of dominion. Effort alone cannot achieve this. Only insight, control, and leverage can. In the end, The man who masters these forces governs not by motion but by effect, not by labor but by orchestration. Authority arises from anticipation, from manipulation of circumstance, from alignment of perception with purpose. Hard work alone builds no empire. Insight without action is impotent. The ruler who understands the currents of human nature, the flow of fortune, and the mechanics of leverage secures outcomes before opposition can act. He bends men, circumstance, and opportunity to his design, achieving power that is invisible, inexorable, and unassailable. Control is not displayed, it is exercised quietly until the world conforms to the architect's will. Effort becomes effect, motion becomes consequence, and fortune becomes instrument. Those who believe in labor alone remain trapped in the cycle of toil and disappointment. Those who understand leverage, anticipate human nature, and orchestrate circumstance rise beyond effort, commanding not only wealth and influence, but inevitability itself. The ruler who endures knows that dominion is sustained not by appearance alone, nor by force alone, but by the continuous alignment of resources, perception, and human inclination. Every subordinate, every ally, every competitor must be measured, their motives anticipated, their potential leveraged. Loyalty is temporary, ambition permanent. To govern effectively is to convert the ambitions of others into instruments of authority while restraining the impulses that threaten it. Misjudgment is fatal. Calculation is survival. Men obey the inevitable more readily than the imposed. To craft inevitability is to arrange circumstances so that opposition appears futile before it begins. This requires patience, observation, and timing. The patient architect waits for the alignment of advantage, striking decisively when opportunity is at its apex. The laborer acts blindly, expending effort in the void. The strategist positions quietly, converting motion into impact, preparation into conquest. Authority is built upon the unseen manipulation of currents that others cannot perceive. Fortune cannot be controlled, but it can be anticipated and exploited. The perceptive ruler discerns patterns in apparent randomness, prepares contingencies, and converts hazard into leverage. Every shift in circumstance carries potential for gain or loss. The man who cannot interpret it remains subject to the whims of others and the unpredictability of events. Success is the product not of chance, but of calculated engagement with the forces that govern men and circumstance alike. Perception is as vital as action. The appearance of confidence, competence, and inevitability shapes behavior more powerfully than overt coercion. Men respond to what they believe will occur, not always to what actually occurs. By controlling perception, the ruler shapes reality itself, ensuring that compliance and alignment are secured before force or labor is required. Subtle influence multiplies effect, turning minimal action into decisive outcomes. Alliances and dependencies must be structured to endure fluctuation. Friends may become rivals, subordinates may betray, circumstances may shift. The wise ruler prepares for this, creating systems in which the self-interest of others reinforces his authority. Risk is neutralized, opposition transformed into instrument, and unpredictability harnessed to advance dominion. Effort alone is insufficient. Only through insight, calculation, and leverage can authority be secured and maintained. Ultimately, mastery arises from the union of observation, foresight, and orchestration. Labor, unaccompanied by strategy, produces little beyond fatigue. Motion, uninformed by calculation, achieves nothing beyond effort. To command is to anticipate, to manipulate, to position every element of circumstance and human motive so that outcomes become inevitable. He who understands this exercises influence quietly, decisively, and irreversibly, bending men, fortune, and opportunity to his design until authority is not merely achieved, but absolute. The man who secures true power understands that effort alone cannot substitute for comprehension. Labor without insight is wasted. Action without anticipation is vulnerability. Every man, every institution, every opportunity, is a variable in a system that must be mastered. To prevail, one must position resources, manipulate perception, and direct the ambitions of others so that they reinforce authority rather than undermine it. The world yields only to calculation, foresight, and the disciplined application of influence. Every gesture carries consequence. A word spoken, a promise made, an allowance granted all are instruments to shape behavior and circumstance. The perceptive ruler measures these carefully, understanding that human nature is guided as much by perception as by reality. Fear, desire, vanity, and greed are levers to be applied with precision. Those who ignore them are subject to forces they cannot control. Those who wield them convert minimal effort into maximal effect, transforming circumstance into instrument, opposition into compliance. Timing governs all outcomes. Action taken too soon or too late loses potency. Inaction without observation invites misfortune. The strategist waits, observing the alignment of human motives, resources, and circumstance, striking only when the convergence of factors ensures decisive advantage. Hard work unaccompanied by such calculation produces only motion, while guided action produces consequence. The laborer reacts to the world. The master shapes it invisibly, bending currents before confrontation is necessary. Leverage multiplies influence. Men and resources, inert alone, become formidable instruments when arranged strategically. Delegation is not convenience, it is force applied through others' ambition. Alliances are not merely supportive, they are channels through which authority is reinforced, ambition aligned, and resistance neutralized. Those who cannot wield leverage remain trapped in the cycle of toil, while those who understand it achieve outcomes that appear effortless, inevitable, and enduring. Betrayal is certainty, and the wise ruler anticipates it. By aligning self-interest with authority, structuring dependency, and distributing consequence and reward, he converts potential threats into instruments of power. Every risk is calculated, every hazard transformed into opportunity, every opposition neutralized before it manifests. Labor alone cannot achieve this. Mastery requires insight, anticipation, and relentless orchestration of circumstance and motive. Ultimately, dominance arises from intelligence, foresight, and leverage, not mere toil. Authority is established in the mind, exercised through subtle manipulation, and consolidated by orchestration of perception, resources, and human behavior. Hard work without these tools is impotent. Action without anticipation is futile. The ruler who masters control, aligns leverage, and anticipates the currents of men and fortune achieves not temporary gain, but enduring, inevitable command. All power rests upon the understanding that nothing is permanent except change itself. Men shift, loyalties falter, fortunes rise and collapse with a cruel rhythm. The ruler who endures does so not by laboring endlessly, nor by appealing to virtue or morality, but by mastering the architecture of consequence. He observes the currents of human ambition, deciphers the hidden impulses that govern action, and positions himself so that every movement, every effort of others, serves his design without their awareness. Effort is multiplied through leverage. Influence is secured through foresight. To command is to anticipate, to act before necessity arises, to transform uncertainty into inevitability. Every word spoken, every gesture made, every alliance forged or dissolved is calculated for its effect on perception, circumstance, and outcome. Men follow what they believe cannot be resisted. They bend to authority that appears absolute. The laborer may exhaust himself for years and achieve nothing, while the strategist achieves dominion through careful orchestration, patience, and relentless calculation. Timing, perception, and the alignment of human ambition are the instruments by which effort becomes power. Betrayal is not a misfortune, but a certainty, and the wise ruler structures every relationship, every system, every dependency to neutralize it or convert it into advantage. Fear, desire, vanity, and self-interest are levers to be applied judiciously. Obedience is ensured not by morality, but by the alignment of incentive with authority. Every risk is measured, every hazard transformed into instrument, every opposition anticipated and countered before it can manifest. Control is never passive. It is continuously reinforced through observation, adjustment, and subtle action. The world does not reward toil. It rewards design. Hard work alone produces only exhaustion. Strategy, foresight, and leverage convert motion into consequence, chance into inevitability, and labor into dominion. The ruler who comprehends this bends men, circumstance, and fortune to his will, quietly, invisibly, and inexorably. Authority is not displayed. It is exercised with precision until resistance becomes irrelevant. Ultimately, success is the product of mastery over human nature, circumstance, and perception. The man who rises beyond labor achieves inevitability, not through effort, but through insight, calculation, and orchestration. He converts the currents of ambition, fear, and desire into instruments of command, aligns opportunity with action, and wields leverage to magnify every resource. Hard work builds no empire, only the deliberate, the calculating, and the perceptive secure outcomes that endure. Power is not given, it is designed, seized, and maintained with unflinching resolve. The world bends to those who understand this, and in their hands effort becomes effect, motion becomes consequence, and authority becomes absolute.